Good morning, everyone, and welcome to yet another EPALE online discussion. My name is Andrea La Peña, and I am the Deputy Director of the Lifelong Learning Platform, and I will be your host for today. And today, as you might have seen from the banner, we are here to address a sensitive topic that is always on everyone's mind, but perhaps less prominent than it should be. Our discussion will be centered on gender equality and adult learning. We will be exploring current trends, the challenges to achieve gender-balanced ecosystems in education and training, and even share some ideas that have proven valid in some contexts in Europe. Now, building lifelong learning systems is a transformative act, and as such, it requires a gender-sensitive approach. I think we can all agree on that. Don't get me wrong, gender imbalance in education and training does not mean only that men dominate other genders. We see general imbalance and inequalities in enrollment, in employment rates, etc., etc. And most of them, and this is the important part, most of them are sector-specific. So, for instance, we know that women dominate among education, health, and work graduates, but they only constitute 13% of graduates in STEM VET. When it comes to adult learning, which is the sector that interests us the most, recent studies confirm that women participate in adult education in Europe, and especially in non-formal and informal environments, much more than men. So we're here to address these questions and much, much more with a couple of experts. So let me introduce and welcome Silvia Liuti, a gender equality expert from Formazione in Italy and honorary member of the Gender Equality Task Force set up by EAA, FVET, and ERLAL. Welcome, Silvia.
Good morning to all. I'm really happy to contribute to this EPALE webinar. So I'm looking forward to further discuss with you and the other colleagues. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. We're happy to have you. And on screen with us is also Piotr Sadowski, Secretary General of Volunteer Europe, Vice President of the Conference of International NGOs of the Council of Europe, and former President of the Social Platform. Welcome, Piotr.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Thank you for the invitation. It's lovely to be here with Silvia as well, and very much looking forward to the next 45 minutes, 1 hour, if need be.
Even 2 hours. The discussion will go on until 4 in the afternoon in a written form on EPALE, and the community is actually already engaged. We see there are a few comments coming in. We opened the comments on the blog post, and there's one from Elga in particular that caught our attention, and that's the one that you see on your screens. It's a common view that women and men are equal. But women are more likely to, improve, go to universities, take a more active role in improving their professional qualifications, change specialization, and have more flexibility. But they would take any job to support their families, and however, they're still more likely to suffer from discrimination, redundancies, receive lower wages, and employers prefer men when choosing employees. Because motherhood apparently is still an issue for employers. So let me just start off and dive into the topic by asking Silvia the first question. Silvia, you're a gender equality expert, and I would like to know what's your take on current trends in your country, in Italy, but also in the EU in general. What sectors of education and training show gender-based inequalities?
Okay, yes. I'm gender equality expert in the labor market. Just to underline it, because I just attended at the beginning of 2001 and 2 an executive master that was focused exactly on developing gender equality expert in the labor market, so to be focused on this imbalance dynamics that you were mentioning, related to the whole, let's say, chain from the education to vocational education and training and labor market, including also lifelong learning approach. So what is important to underline is refer first of all to the context, to data that you were asking. And what I see actually in Italy is a risk of regression of some progression that we had in gender equality, in the sense that are in education and labor market, we have still a kind of horizontal segregation that you were mentioning. It is important, in my opinion, also in this kind of opportunity online to say exactly the terminology, the exact terminology that is something we are missing while we are discussing about gender equality. And I think it is important because I'm fully convinced that gender equality is a matter of professionalism, especially for those who are working in education and labor market related issues. Because For instance, let's look at guidance. If you, as guidance practitioners, are not fully aware of what are the discrimination in the labor market and do not take the opportunity to have interviews with potential learners or future workers to empower them on how to deal with this discrimination from the labor market, that there is horizontal segregation. So for instance, why women, girls are choosing more humanities, arts, education, care sectors, and men go more for STEM, scientific, engineering fields, ICT, digital. That is a kind of really replicating stereotypes. How can we deal with this? How can we shift this paradigm? It is important that we have qualified, competent guidance practitioners also on gender equality issues, and not representing the labor market as a kind of gender neutral, which is not actually. So this is about data related to Italy. We still have more women than men as graduates from tertiary education, so better perform also in academia, but then at the end they are less employed, more in humanities, care, education sector, but less employed than men. And this is something I would like to underline and say straight like it is. It's a waste of talent, in my opinion, in the sense that we are investing money to make them succeed and tertiary education level, but then at the end, once they have to give us back, let's say, as a society at home, their capacities, what they learned through this pathway, then we let them segregated at taking care of children and not considering as a valuable resource. So this is something really important, high impacting in Italy, unfortunately, as it is becoming also more risky, the situation according to the current context, where it seems that also health rights, women health rights are under attack, and each part of this, of how the context is shaped around education and labor market related to women and men, of course, is affecting the imbalance and can be further exacerbate, the situation, discrimination. Just to underline, I mentioned women, if I have just a few minutes more. Of course, if we are including this gender equal approach and gender mainstreaming, that it means that we have a clear picture of what are the needs, the different needs of women and men according to the context, and how differently our policies and practices are impacting women and men at the end. Of course, we have to consider also why men are not choosing care sector, how we educate men as being brave leaders, very powerful, so kind of stereotyped vision to be not fit for care sector, for working with emotions and with empathy. So this is something also important to keep in mind, in my opinion.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. The picture is grimmer than I thought, but I very much like the reference to horizontal discrimination. Let me turn to Piotr. Piotr, you have an outstanding experience in the field of social affairs and social rights, and I wanted to know. I mean, we all know that gender inequalities are particularly important in this field because addressing social affairs means also addressing gender inequalities. But do you have any good practices that come to mind that can help counterbalance a little bit this horizontal discrimination that Sylvia was mentioning?
Of course, yes, and thanks, Sylvia, for this introduction. And before I delve into your question and some answers on good practices, Andrea, I think the thing that I would like to start with, that for me, a lot begins with decision making as well, with political and economic decision making. And the problem that we have is this: despite the fact that there's progress, for example, in some EU member states, overall, I think it's only just over 30% of national parliament members across the EU are women. So also, what Sylvia was talking about the leadership, it needs to be also not tokenistic, and it really, really needs to be empowering. So this is something that we need to improve on. And I will come back to it at the very end of the session as well. But now to go back into the area of social affairs, absolutely, gender inequalities in social affairs have very deep roots because they can impact access to resources, to career progression, to participation in society. And civil society very often is shown as the exemplary of having some pioneering, impactful practices which can be used to address the issue of gender inequality. I mean, within the AGA Gender Equality Index, there's progress being is made. It's been revealed in the latest 2023 report, but there are still gender-based disparities. And I know we're talking about adult education, but I would like to also mention a little bit about employment, decision-making that I said, financial independence. And unfortunately, some of those large inequalities do appear in civil society and NGO sectors where, for example, Sylvia mentioned the care sector dominated by women as well, but it tends to be that women in those sectors as well do not attain the executive roles, which they should be attaining as well. So it's more focused on the delivery, on the frontline delivery, but not so much on the executive decision making and empowerment and the movement from the, let's say, from the sort of more frontline, but also lower levels of hierarchy to those decision making positions as well, which is very important to address. Some of the effective approaches to specifically tackle gender disparities in employment, which in a sense, if you look at employment as being part of a formal learning processes in your adult life, within civil society, things that have been taking place are gender responsive budgeting. And I know European Women's Lobby, for example, has been looking at targeted funding which enables women in civil society to access essential training, additional training, mentorship, opportunities for advancement in the traditionally male-dominated areas. So here, learning within the context of employment comes into play. You mentioned, Andrea, that I'm also active in the Council of Europe. In the Conference of INGOs, we have also been looking at gender equality measures, which become exemplary across organizations. So we're looking at incorporating gender-sensitive measures in policy design and ensuring that women's voices are very much integrated into policy debates and decision-making processes as well. And then I would, in terms of showcasing some good examples, some good practices, I will look into the family of lifelong learning platform members. One example is that of coming from the European Association for the Education of Adults, which, in my view, really actively addresses gender disparities in adult education. It's specifically referring to those initiatives which promote access to learning opportunities for genders other than men, particularly those from marginalized backgrounds, from the more seldom heard groups. Because this is aimed at bridging both the education but also then workforce gaps. The EAA has a paper, a background paper on adult learning and gender, which I think could be very useful as a follow-up for further sort of background reading, if anyone's interested. And it's available on the EAA's website, because it talks about providing more flexible learning options, which then have to accommodate things such as the roles that women specifically often care, such as caregiving, looking after the more sort of the family context, because this is about promotion of lifelong learning as a pathway to then economic empowerment, social inclusion. We have another member within the lifelong learning platform, ESU, the European Students' Union. I would like to look more at the sort of maybe a little bit younger, although, you can be a student all your life as well. That's the beauty of lifelong learning. It's about their work focuses a lot on gender sensitive policies within higher education and fostering more inclusive learning environments. In non-traditional areas for women, like STEM, but also in my discourse later on, I will be talking that it's not just STEM that we need to be looking at, but it's generally around other areas as well of higher education. We've got another member, which is EPALE, European Federation for Intercultural Learning, who looks at bringing a more unique perspective by promoting intercultural learning with a gender equality focus. So intercultural learning is also a super important part of the process of the lifelong learning journey that you embark on as a young person, then you move on through your adulthood and through your older years as well. And for me, the importance of intercultural learning really cannot be undermined, because it can really continue shaping your mindset, training your mindset as well, and helping you adapt as well to the changing circumstances around you. And if in that process, targeting the sort of the gender stereotypes and the gender bias that exists can be also tackled, then I think we're more in a win-win situation. Lastly, and this is not just to single them out, but Solidar Foundation also has had a project called Equip, which has been advocating for quality assurance in education and working to ensure that learning environments specifically promote equal opportunities for all, regardless of gender. And I think this brings the ethos back to what the lifelong learning platform is all about, because basically our platform is about supporting lifelong learning as a tool for social mobility, really emphasizing the role of inclusive education in all settings in empowering all genders and really reducing social economic disparities. So I think I'll stop here. I've got some more examples if necessary that we can then employ in the later discussion. But hopefully this gives a little bit of a highlight of what is being done.
Amazing, refreshing. Thank you very much, Piotr. It really helps to put things into perspective and see how civil society is active and has proven to be a valid force in the change that we're looking to achieve. All of those practices, we will make sure to leave them to the community so that it can be inspiring, perhaps, and even transferred to some other contexts if possible. Silvia, since you mentioned that you are an expert indeed in the labor market when it comes to gender equality, I wanted to ask you if you think the gender inequalities only relate to participation in learning, or those inequalities are then subsequently reflected in access to the labor market and access to work-based learning opportunities.
Yes, sure. This is a key point. There are inequalities in education, although according to data, and also Piotr was mentioning something you too at the beginning, in also in adult education, it seems that data show that we have more participation of women than men. Then in relation to a PX survey, how, for instance, women and men perform with literacy competencies and math numeracy competence are almost the same, but then at the end, how effectively women can spend these learning opportunities effectively in the labor market. This is a key issue I just mentioned before. And what we found as Formazione, and also I will give you an example of a very interesting project, a practice developed together with EAEA. And there's also relation with personal situations. So, for instance, the experience of motherhood. In relation to this, for instance, coming back to data, in Italy, we have a kind of 1 out of 5 mothers leave the job at the first childbirth. So this means that that's something not well designed and planned at societal level, at policy level, because it's always missing, as I said, missing opportunities, wasting talents, according to data related to the level of education, and why motherhood it continues to be considered a kind of minus, negatively affecting women performance and women future availability for the workplace. Consider also that in Italy we have also worse data related to the employment rate in south of Italy, where we have around 21.4% of mothers aged from 25 to 49 with low qualifications. This is the employment rate of this kind of mothers. So very, very low. So what we try to also develop, and what I think it's also important, together with using the gender mainstreaming approach, that is something very strategic. It's a kind also of thinking out of the box approach, innovating the activities that directly addressing women. And we developed, and actually we are still developing, because the project will close at the end of the year, and the project Move Up, together with EAEA, I was mentioning, and other partners from different countries, that is focused on making value out of the motherhood experience for the labor market. What does it mean? That during motherhood, parents in general, but for sure mothers, according to that I was mentioning, can experience skills and transversal competencies that are very useful also for the labor market, for the workplace. And we focus specifically on one of the 8 key competencies for lifelong learning, exactly personal, social, and learning to learn competence. That is something so wide. I'm sure you're familiar with such a competence, but through motherhood, we found that effectively women can really experience a kind of, in relation to learning to learn, on to personal, social, how to keep, choose priority, how to have this powerful decision making also under pressure. If you think about now what kind of a situation we face dealing with children, or dealing with this kind of very new experience that motherhood brings itself, or communication, interpersonal communication, empathy, how to better learn to learn, no? Because you are new to such a kind of situation and environment. And these competencies, if we think about, are really strategic for the labor market, and are honestly also requested, no, by employers. But that in the end, when it comes again to ask for, I'm able to, I developed such kind of competencies, can evaluate these discriminations through a gender stereotype vision appear again. So we supported some mothers with low qualification, especially, so more in need to be empowered in the different countries, Italy, Austria, Greece, and Portugal, to first self-assess there's such a competence, personal, social, and learning to learn, because they are even not fully aware of what they learned through this period and what they can bring effectively to the job market. So starting from self-assessment, then we tailored a specific training addressing some gap, and also to further empower them on their self-esteem, on being more oriented to access the labor market. And then we piloted this activity and tried to make them accessing the labor market. So what is important through these practices is what we also want to communicate as a kind of rationale behind the choice we did, that the project was within the forward-looking cooperation project, focused on how to further implement or develop upskilling pathways. So the importance to target the action specifically, so to refer to a specific target group that need a specific action, that need gender mainstreaming, so data, and to start with planning and designing appropriate measures, and then to start investing with a kind of innovative approach. We found that it's not valued yet. So this is a kind of an example that I wanted to bring to the discussion here. as a source of inspiration for others, but also as a matter of methodology. So not always think about standardized or traditional approaches, but also thinking out of the box could be helpful in combating gender stereotypes in education and labor market.
Absolutely agree. I'm very happy that you mentioned the key competencies for lifelong learning. For us, this is still the Polar Star that guides our actions. And I'm very happy that you mentioned motherhood, because as a young parent, I also see the differences that society requires from mothers and instead than fathers. Yeah, so let me turn to you. I wanted to ask you, do you think there's a recipe to tackle gender-based inequalities in education and training? And how far down would you trickle for this recipe to be truly impactful? Because we mentioned leadership. Should also mention the ground. Perhaps it's a cultural thing. Certainly, it's a cultural thing in a way. What's your recipe?
Okay. I think, I mean, it really is an issue that really needs to be truly tackled, but it's not an easy issue to be tackled in an easy way. There's not a quick sort of fixed solution. It's not about putting plasters on a small wound. I think the wound is entrenched in so many different areas, like you've already been mentioning now. So I think this requires very sort of multi-layered approaches, but also a lot of cooperation between the different sectors which are engaged in the in the journey of eradicating gender-based inequalities in adult education, in training, but also in other settings. I think at policy level, there's about embedding gender-sensitive frameworks across all sectors that I mentioned, but particularly in education, social, and in social protection as well, because that can then provide the grounds for really meaningful change. Andrea, you mentioned yourself the differences between in terms of in parenthood, the roles which are sort of maybe traditionally thought of that women have to offer as mothers as opposed to fathers as well. That can be also tackled, right? But that requires a systematic change, and really the social protection as well really needs to be worked into part of this process. I talked about responsive budgeting. So that can work in the workplace, but I think it can also work in projects itself. But when I talk about projects, I think it's way more than, for example, those of us who have been applying for various European projects. You work in your application, you come to the little bit which says how many men, how many women, how many. Most recent development is non-binary people you will engage in your project, and that's it. Nothing else happens. There's no further questions about addressing gender-based disparities. There's a big focus on KPIs, such as how many X followers you will get. And anyway, I am not personally any more interested in giving more platform to Elon Musk. I think there are more important things that we should be focusing, which is exactly how our project funding will benefit those groups which are perhaps left out because they're harder to reach. So the project funding, the design of the project funding itself should make it possible as well to target these groups, especially when it comes to gender-based disparities that should be engaged in the project. So it goes into the design, but it also then goes into what sort of objectives you set yourself, and how do you report on it, rather than giving just I gave the example of indicating how many followers you gain through your social media accounting. I think lifelong learning, of course, I would say that plays a really special role, an important role here, because providing accessible, flexible learning opportunities, which will be tailored to the diverse needs of women, especially those who are balancing caregiving responsibilities, families, or are returning to work after career interruptions, is absolutely essential. I talked about the different examples of the LLP members. One thing, so as not to repeat myself, I would probably say that this approach in lifelong learning on such good examples really goes beyond traditional education. Traditional education, which we think, schools, higher education. No, there are also other opportunities. We need to think about education as something really, really holistic as well. So I think that because if only then if we look at lifelong learning as a holistic approach, we can look for opportunities for growth, for economic empowerment, for social inclusion, for addressing those barriers that yes, women frequently encounter in balancing work, family, personal aspirations. We are in the process of right now a lot of advocacy going on for an intergroups in the European Parliament as well as lifelong learning platform. We are advocating for an intergroup on education, and it's very important to us as well that this is a very sort of inclusive, has a very inclusive focus that goes beyond traditional formal learning as well. And I think this is the more we talk about the issues that are issues which need to be addressed, such as gender-based disparities, we have to think about the fact that whilst formal education is super important, it's not just one of the ways of addressing them. There are other parts of lifelong learning of education which can foster, I guess, a community, a network of good practices, which will enable women and other genders to gain competencies and confidence in those environments where they're underrepresented or where there are not adequate provisions for their inclusion and for their engagement. And I'll come back to what Sylvia was talking also a lot about the grassroots level. I think the grassroots approach to lifelong learning is really important for empowering women to participate really fully, very much in their local economies, because when we talk about the grassroots level, the big change that will happen will be at the local level as well, and it will be felt at the local level. So creation of these pathways at the very local level to sustain employment, but also to continue the education, all of this combined together can really strengthen the role and recognition and also appreciation, I think, of the diversity of genders in our local communities. So yes, so in essence, I think for me, addressing these gender-based inequalities requires a really sort of integrated lifelong learning approach, which becomes the central pillar of how we design policies, how we implement policies, how we look at workplaces, how we engage with other stakeholders as well, in formal education and informal education and in training and in different employment sectors where there's still a lot of scope for improvement.
Absolutely, definitely. There's room for improvement pretty much everywhere. And thank you very much for mentioning our efforts to set up an intergroup among the many hats that Piotr wears daily. There's also the one of vice president of the Lifelong Learning Platform, and indeed we are in the process of an advocacy campaign to set up an intergroup in the European Parliament to bridge a little bit education and skills that goes way beyond formal education, as you said. Tackling also non-formal and informal learning environments, and it does have a gender perspective in the concept per se, because again, setting up lifelong learning systems cannot be achieved without a gender-sensitive approach. So I see you nod, so this is a good sign. And Silvia, since you're nodding, in a couple of minutes. Since you work a lot, I mean, you're also a bad expert, and lately in the last few years in the EU, there's been a lot of not only talking but also a lot of doing for the twin transition. So ensuring that Europe is fit for the digital age and for a greener transition. These are called the twin transition in the Brussels jargon, if you want. And I wanted to ask you very quickly if there's a connection between gender equality and those twin transitions.
Yes, it's a kind of, sorry for boring you, will be a kind of mantra from my side that gender equality matters everywhere and transversally, of course, because it's a kind of putting on the right lenses and see the environment and the context differently. That's why if it's not enough introduced, we do not think about enough how to consider gender throughout the education process in the labor market access pathways, we are missing opportunities, and that's why we are replicating gender stereotype. And especially in what you were mentioning, the opportunity of having now this twin transition, so these two main sectors towards we are to develop skills, and where's skills shortage, green and digital, and where of course women are even more discriminated according to what we said at the beginning of this webinar. It starts from even before primary school, let's say, but that no, girls go for such a kind of humanities area of studies, humanities domains, and less to this part of digital, technical, engineering, which are very relevant for both the transitions, the digital and the green. But again, what I would like to introduce as a different element is we are fully aware that it's a kind of stereotype vision, but it's such is a matter of fact that women perform better in social skills, have the opportunity to develop more transversal skills, and transversal skills are key for both the digital and the green transitions. And when it comes to put into practice this kind of skills, or to value the skills, because give you the capacity to have a whole picture of the context, to better address a problem, to have a problem solving approach, then when it comes to this, they are less employed, because we of course need a high level of technical skills, that I agree with this. But keep in mind that we do not need only such kind of skills, but also those who can give employers and employees the opportunity to effectively further progress on these transitions, and to support the process toward this transition. So this is a kind of my contribution to this reflection on the two transitions. Thank you, Andrea.
But you said it all at the very beginning. It's a transversal issue, so it should inform all of our actions, huh? From social actions to everyday actions to political actions. Maybe one last question for Piotr, just on the imagination side. Imagine you have a magic wand, and you can change one thing in Europe to make sure that we have and achieve gender equality in adult learning. But just one thing. What would it be, and why?
Okay, so my sort of creativity and imagination would be linked with political a little bit in my answer. But I think if I could change one thing, I would create a Europe where lifelong learning is really universally accessible. It's adaptable and it's tailored to every individual's circumstances. I talked about holistic approach to lifelong learning. I mean, if we could imagine a world where learning opportunities are not constrained by financial, social, or time barriers, where I guess where any woman, but also any other gender, regardless of age, economic status, caregiving role, can access lifelong learning opportunities that empowers, that strengthens financial independence, that connects more deeply with community. I think this would be my ideal solution: a lifelong learning sort of world which can be truly accessible and equitable. I think can really have the power to dismantle those deeply entrenched gender inequalities that prevent women from participating fully in the society and in the economy. And we talked about that in our conversations here with Sylvia and with you, Andrea. Where I will get political, perhaps a little bit, and you'll have to forgive me for this, but I just cannot stop myself from saying that. I think as we look to now 2024 and beyond, especially the new mandate of the EU, of the European Commission, for me, it's clear that Europe's commitment to gender equality still needs a much more renewed sense of urgency and accountability. I think leadership, I talked about it in the beginning, is paramount, not only in policy, but also in setting a very strong example at the highest levels. And I think the recent mandate of the European Commission has really left many people questioning whether gender equality really remains a genuine priority. Because despite many promises and ambitions, progress has been, as you know, marred by setbacks, policies falling short, and also too much, I'm sorry to use this word, disobedience when it comes to delivering on gender equality goals. And I really don't think we can continue in a Europe where gender equality commitments are really sidelined or diluted by what is eventually political inconvenience. or political convenience, actually, even better to say it that way, which comes from national settings. I think in the coming years, what we really must demand, especially as our sector, is a really an unwavering leadership that not only champions gender equality in words, but really implements it into real action and real change, where lifelong learning, economic empowerment, and really inclusive policies should be non-negotiable pillars of the European vision and of our European values. Because I'm not sure we are prepared to build a Europe where gender equality is woven into the fabric of all of our policies and practices yet. And it comes back to the need for leadership, because only with this bold leadership, this clear accountability, delivery on promises, and commitment to inclusive growth, we can make gender equality a much more lived reality for every woman, but also for other underrepresented genders across the EU. And I think this is a time where we really have gone beyond these sort of incremental changes, going one step forward, three steps back. And Europe, as a leader, really needs to deliver on its promise of equality through much more transformative, much more deliverable actions.
And you went political, but I agree with you. Sometimes gender equality is we have the feeling from the outside that it's just a tick the box exercise rather than an actual priority, and this then trickles down to all sectors, including adult learning, of course. We see on the community that we have been delivered a lot of thumbs up for our discussion, which means that the community is there, it's engaged, and very much appreciates our discussion. We're slowly but surely heading towards the end. Just to remind everyone that the discussion, this online discussion, this debate that we're having here, is still going to be over, but the discussion itself continues on EPALE. We will definitely keep on sharing all the practices that you both mentioned, so that they remain within the community and they can inspire further actions. But I would definitely invite the whole community and users on EPALE to share their good practices, of course, that can help us achieve gender equality in adult learning, but also to contribute to the debate, sharing ideas and opinions and comments. So for the moment, I would just thank you both very, very much for staying with us this morning or this afternoon, depending on when you're going to rewatch this online discussion. Perhaps just one final sentence from each to say goodbye and to inspire further discussions. Silvia.
Yeah, thank you. Because I was thinking about one more element to not forget. It's about it's really related to the Italian context to gender-based violence and prevent sexual harassment in the workplaces. So, and to create safe environment starting from education, because it's really affecting how women feel not only considered, respected, but also safe, so able to effectively invest on their future and be fully supported by the society as a whole. This is something really important to keep in mind, and that affect transversally the society, labor market, the economies of our countries.
Yeah, thank you very much for this thought. We keep on addressing the issue in education, but it's of course a much larger and sometimes critical issue in societies in general. So thank you for reminding us of this. What one final sentence?
Sure. I think my final sentence is we also need apart from policy changes, we also need a shift in mindsets and a commitment from all sectors, so government, civil society, employers, educational institutions, to really see adult learning as something that is a shared responsibility and really becomes a pillar of gender equality. That would be my concluding sentence.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to both of you for staying with us and contributing to this discussion with your expertise. It's been a pleasure to moderate and to organize this on behalf of EPALE. Thank you very much for those who've been listening live, and to those of you who will watch and rewatch this online discussion. And see you on EPALE for the written discussion on the platform. Thank you very much.